Welcome to What About Me, the podcast, as I continue to amplify women's voices and confront the systems that silence them. I am your host, Linda. Today, I'll explore how financial independence shapes women's lives and why economic empowerment is not just a policy goal, but a survival strategy. I will also honor the legacy of Daphne Caruana Galicia, the Maltese journalist who paid the ultimate price for confronting corruption, and I will explore how her friend and fellow journalist Caroline Muscat continues that fight, armed with truth and tenacity. First, I'll First, let's talk about financial independence as agency. Economic abuse is a major barrier for women living abusive relationships. Survivors often remain trapped due to financial dependency, lack of access to funds, or debt incurred by their abuser, according to Domestic Truth Foundation.org. In Australia, women living abusive relationships often face financial hardships with limited income and no claim to shared assets. Financial literacy and access to independent income are critical tools for escaping abuse and rebuilding autonomy. The World Bank reports that women hold only 22% of ministerial positions and make up less than a third of senior business leaders worldwide. Women are also underrepresented in asset ownership and entrepreneurship, particularly in low and middle income countries. Economic empowerment enables women to participate in public life, challenge discriminatory systems, and influence policy. Women in leadership are linked to higher employee satisfaction, greater innovation, and better financial performance in organizations. In this segment, I'll tackle something deceptively simple: money. But this isn't just a financial story, it's a story about freedom. Economic independence is the gateway to choice. For a woman trapped in an abusive relationship, it's the difference between staying or leaving. For a woman in a workplace that undervalues her, it's the power to walk away and demand better. And in public life, financial autonomy allows women to stand boldly, lead fearlessly, and speak truth without fearing who pays the bills. Yet globally, women still earn less, on average 83 cents to every dollar earned by men. They own fewer assets, run fewer businesses, and make up only 22% of ministerial positions. In leadership rooms, boardrooms, and political circles, women are still guests, rarely hosts. This isn't just about fairness, it's about survival. When women lack access to income, credit, or resources, they become vulnerable, economically vulnerable, legally vulnerable, socially invisible. And empowerment, it's not just about earning a wage, it's about wielding a voice. We have seen it in rural India where women lead councils initiated 62% more water projects than male led ones. Economic empowerment shapes lives, it shapes futures, and it lays the foundation for every other kind of equality we hope to build. Because until a woman controls her finances, she may never truly control her fate. A voice from the ground, financial independence as survival. I'll introduce you to Rose Sally, a grassroots activist and founder of the Support and Action for Women Network in Manchester. Rose works with migrant and minoritized women, many of whom arrive in the UK with no financial autonomy, no access to credit, and no understanding of their rights. She tells a story of a woman who fled domestic violence with her children, only to find herself trapped by bureaucracy. No bank account, no income, no way to rent a flat or buy groceries. It wasn't just poverty, it was powerlessness. Through Rosie's organization, this woman was helped to rebuild financial literacy, access emergency grants, and eventually start a small business selling handmade goods. The woman didn't just survive, she reclaimed her voice. Rose says financial independence isn't just about money, it's about dignity. It's about saying, I will exist, I will matter, I will choose. This is why economics is a gender issue, because when women control their finances, they control their futures, and when they don't, they are often left voiceless in systems that weren't built for them. So there is justice behind economic empowerment. Rosie's story isn't just about financial literacy, it's about survival, because when women lack economic power, they often lack protection. And when they gain it, they don't just earn, they escape, resist, and reclaim. Economic empowerment intersects with safety in profound ways. For example, women with independent incomes are less likely to stay in abusive relationships. Those with access to credit and housing are more able to flee violence and rebuild. And when women know their financial rights, they are better equipped to challenge exploitation, whether in the home, the workplace, or the marketplace. Justice too is shaped by economics. Without money, legal recourse is often out of reach. Filing a case, hiring a lawyer, taking time off work to attend court. These are luxuries many women can't afford, and so injustice persists, not because women are silent, but because they are economically silenced. As the United Nations Women's Strategy puts it, women's economic empowerment is fundamental to their ability to enjoy all other human rights. It's not just a developmental goal, it's a human rights imperative. So when we talk about gender equality, we must talk about wages, ownership, and access. Because without economic justice, safety is fragile, and without safety, freedom is a myth. In parts of Africa, marriage isn't always about love, it's about survival. Therefore, marriage becomes a financial lifeline. For many women, especially in rural or economically strained communities, marriage offers access to housing, food, and social legitimacy. Without financial independence, the choice to marry becomes less about partnership and more about protection. A 2018 World Bank report found that in much of Africa, marriage is the sole basis for women's access to social and economic rights. Divorce or widowed can strip women of property, income, and even custody of their children. In this context, marriage becomes a financial anchor, but also a potential trap. Dr. Rachel Fielder, speaking to AWIM News, noted that poorer girls and women may choose marriage over education if it provides social and economic benefits. That's not empowerment, it's economic entrapment disguised as tradition. And when marriage is driven by financial desperation, it can expose women to economic abuse, gender based violence, and mental health strain. The pressure to endure harmful relationship for the sake of financial support is a silent epidemic. This is why economic empowerment matters, because when women have options, marriage becomes a choice, not a necessity. Across Africa, a quiet revolution is unfolding, not in parliaments or boardrooms, but in classrooms, community halls, and mobile apps. It's the rise of financial literacy programs designed to equip women with the tools to choose their futures, not just endure them. Therefore, financial literacy is a liberation for women's empowerment. Take CFLE Africa, a Ghana based nonprofit working to integrate financial education into school curricula and community programs. Their mission to empower young Africans, especially women, with the knowledge to make sound financial decisions, plan for the future, and break cycles of inherited poverty. In Nigeria, the Women's Financial Literacy and Empowerment Network is training students, rural women, entrepreneurs, and students in budgeting, saving, and entrepreneurships. They are not just teaching money, they are teaching confidence, strategy, and voice. And in East Africa, the UNDP and IG launched a regional training program for women entrepreneurs, offering digital and in person modules on financial planning, business development, and resilience. The goal to ensure women are not forced into marriage or silenced by economic desperation, but instead become architects of their own lives. These programs are more than workshops, they are lifelines. They help women open bank accounts, access credit and grants, start businesses, navigate legal and financial systems, and most importantly, see themselves as capable and worthy of independence. Because when women understand money, they understand power. And when they wield their power, they rewrite the rules of marriage, leadership, of legacy. Let me tell you about Asha, a young woman from Mbale, Uganda. At 19, she was expected to marry not for romance, but because it was the only perceived route to survival. Her family struggled financially, and education beyond secondary school was out of reach. But Asha found a local women's corporation offering financial literacy workshops, and microloans. She learned how to budget, how to plan for her goals, and eventually how to launch a small tailoring business with a small loan of less than $50. That decision changed everything. Within 2 years, Asha had trained three other women, saved enough to return to school part time, and began advocating for girls in her community to delay marriage and pursue independence. She didn't just earn income, she earned a voice. Asha now says, I don't need to be rescued by marriage. I am building my own rescue. Let's talk about Daphne Caruana Garusha, a woman who refused silence. In the heart of Malta, one woman stood alone against a tide of corruption, intimidation, and impunity. Her name was Daphne Caruana Garusha, a journalist, a mother, and a relentless seeker of truth. For 3 decades, Daphne exposed the underbelly of Maltese politics, money laundering, nepotism, and the shadowy dealings behind the country's passport for sale scheme. Her blog, Running Commentary, became one of the most read platforms in Malta, drawing over 400,000 views, more than the combined calculation of the nation's newspapers. But her most explosive work came in 2016 when she broke the story of Maltese officials linked to Panama Papers, offshore companies, secret trusts, and payments from foreign governments. She named names: Conrad Mizzi, and implicated the prime minister's wife in owning a hidden company called He Grant. The backlash was swift. Her dogs were poisoned. Her home was set on fire. She faced over 40 lawsuits, and still she never backed down. On October 16, 2017, Daphne was assassinated by a car bomb just outside her home. The explosion was so powerful that her vehicle was moved into a nearby field. Her final blog post, published minutes before her death, ended with the haunting line: There are crooks everywhere you look now. The situation is desperate. Her murder shocked Europe, but it also revealed something deeper: that truth telling women in male dominated spaces face real danger. Daphne wasn't just targeted for her reporting, she was targeted because she stood alone, unprotected, and uncompromising. A 2021 public inquiry found that the Maltese state bore responsibility for her death, having created a climate of impunity that emboldened her killers. The inquiry named former Prime Minister Joseph Muscat and his cabinet as culpable, not for planting the bomb, but for failing to protect her from escalating threats. Daphne's death was not just a loss, it was a warning. that when women confront power, especially in systems built to silence them, the cost can be fatal. But Daphne's legacy lives on in the journalists who picked up her stories, in the protests that followed, and in the foundation that bears her name, fighting for justice and press freedom across Europe. 3 weeks after the assassination of Daphne, another woman stepped forward, not to replace her, but to continue her fight. Caroline Muscat carried the torch. A seasoned investigative journalist and former news editor of the Times of Malta, in November 2017, she founded The Shift News, an independent online platform committed to exposing corruption, defending the press freedom, and challenging the political dominancy of Malta's media landscape. Caroline didn't just inherit Daphne's stories, she inherited her enemies. The shift has been deliberately excluded from government press events, targeted by lawsuits and subjected to online hate campaigns. Muscat and her team have faced relentless pressure, including attempts by MPs to censor their reporting in parliament. But Caroline remains untethered. She says if the authorities had acted on what Daphne was revealing, she would be alive today. Her work has earned international recognition, including the Reporters Without Borders Prize for Independence in 2019. Caroline Muscat has contributed to cross border investigations, collaborated with the Daphne Caruana Galicia Foundation, and helped uncover state sponsored propaganda campaigns that dehumanized Daphne before her death. Caroline's journalism is more than reporting, it's resistance in a country where misogyny is still normalized and where female journalists are called witches for daring to speak truth. The shift stands as a beacon of integrity. She's implemented security protocols to protect her team, trained them to withstand psychological attacks, and built a newsroom that refuses to be silenced even when the cost is high. Caroline didn't just choose this path lightly, but she chose it deliberately. And in doing so, she reminds us that truth telling women don't disappear when threatened by the majority, they multiply. Daphne Caruana Galusha wasn't alone. Across the globe, women journalists are being threatened, harassed, and even killed, not for what they write, but for daring to write at all. In Somalia, investigative journalist Amina Ahmed was forced into exile after exposing government corruption. Her newsroom was raided, her colleagues detained, and she spent 44 days in underground cells before fleeing the country. She now continues her work from abroad, saying journalism is now my resistance. In Iran, female reporters were imprisoned for covering the death of Amini. Their reporting sparked nationwide protest, and both women were sentenced to long prison terms for acting against national security. Their only crimes, telling the truth with a gendered lens. Places such as South Africa seem to be more developed, but female journalists have faced rape threats, death threats, and coordinated online hate campaigns. Social media platform approved ads containing violent misogynistic hate speech targeting female reporters despite having policies against such content. In Mexico, Maria Elena was murdered after reporting on political corruption. She had received threats for months, and her death remains a chilling reminder of how impunity emboldens violence. And in Palestine, photojournalist Fatima was killed in an airstrike in April 2025. She had just been selected for Cannes Festival. Her death, along with those of over 20 other female journalists in Gaza, shows how war zones amplify the danger for women who document truth. These women are not just reporters, they are witnesses, whistleblowers, and warriors. Their stories remind us that journalism is not just a profession, it's a front line, and for women, it's often a battlefield. It's important to remember that for many women journalists, the price of truth isn't just emotional, it's financial. The cost of courage, economic strain, is a silenced career. When female reporters confront corruption, expose injustice, or simply speak with authority, they often face career sabotage. Powerful individuals, politicians, editors, corporate figures don't just threaten their safety, they threaten their livelihood. In the UK in 2023, Women in Journalism report found that nearly half of female journalists promote their work less online due to fear of abuse. Some even remove their bylines to avoid being targeted. This self censorship doesn't just silence voices, it shrinks opportunities, reduces visibility, and limits income. Globally, women journalists are more likely to work on freelance or temporary contracts, which offer little protection when harassment occurs. In Canada, women of color in digital journalism report being confined to ethnic stories, denied full time roles, and afraid to challenge editorial bias for fear of losing their gigs. And when threats escalate, many women are forced into exile, anonymity, or career shifts. And when threats escalate, many women are forced into exile. These are not just tragedies, they are economic erasures. Each silenced woman represents lost income, lost influence, and lost representation. Even in safer contexts, the emotional toll of constant harassment leads many women to leave journalism altogether. A 2023 study by Kenyans found that female journalists were more likely to abandon the profession due to sexual harassment and cyberbullying. So when we talk about press freedom, we must also talk about economic justice because silencing women journalists doesn't just distort the news, it destroys careers. And when women can't afford to speak, society can't afford to listen. The good news is that women are still reclaiming voice and income. Women are building independent media. When traditional newsrooms shut their doors or weaponized silence, many women journalists don't retreat, they build their own platforms. In Argentina, the Marcha Porto emerged from grassroots feminist movements, offering collective journalism rooted in territory, sisterhood, and political resistance. They reject the detached, desk bound model of reporting and instead tell stories of liberation, not just violence. In Canada, journalist Rachel Gilmore turned to TikTok and Instagram after facing layoffs and editorial censorship. She now reaches tens of thousands with independent explainers on politics and human rights, funded through community support and brand partnership. In France, Salome Saki left mainstream media to cover protest movements and social justice issues through her own channels. Her videos went viral and she now balances freelance work with a massive online following, proving that audiences crave authenticity. These women aren't just surviving, they are reshaping journalism. They fund their work through crowdfunding and Patreon, brand collaborators with ethical partners, online courses and consulting, grants from press freedom organizations, and community based media cooperatives. And they are not alone. Initiatives like the Thomson Reuters Foundation's Resistance of Independent Media and Interview Her connect women journalists with funding, training, and visibility, ensuring their stories reach global audiences. Because when women own the platform, they own the narrative. And when they own the narrative, they change the world. Notably, not every journalist builds her platform in exile or under constant threat, but even in the heart of American media, control is hard won. Let's take Meghan Kelly from media controversy to media ownership. Meghan Kelly began as a political correspondent at Fox News, known for challenging both liberal and conservative figures with unapologetic intensity. But her career took sharp turns from confronting then presidential candidate Donald Trump to parting ways with NBC after controversial on air remarks. Many wrote Meghan Kelly off, but instead of disappearing, Meghan Kelly doubled down. In 2020, she launched her own independent media company, Devil May Care Media, and began hosting the Meghan Kelly Show, a daily podcast that now boasts millions of downloads and a deeply loyal audience. No executive oversight, no editorial gatekeeping, just voice, content, and control. By 2025, she expanded with MK Media, a podcast network amplifying voices outside traditional media echo chambers. Her platform now hosts creators offering unapologetic commentary on culture, politics, and the state of journalism. Meghan's success comes from reclaiming editorial freedom, economic autonomy, and audience trust. Meghan Kelly chooses her own topics and guests without censorship. She funds her work and grows her brand independently. And most importantly, by speaking directly to her audience, not through institutional filters. Her story shows that when women own the microphone and the platform, they shift from vulnerable to unshakable. She transformed media rejection into media reinvention. And whether you agree with her politics or not, her trajectory proves one thing: freedom of speech becomes powerful when paired with freedom of income. I'll be honest, when Meghan Kelly was part of corporate media, I never paid much attention to her views. She was just one of many voices, wrapped in studio gloss and directed by producers. Even when she covered major stories, something always felt filtered. But everything changed when she launched her podcast. Suddenly, her analysis on legal cases, especially policy and court rulings, felt sharp, grounded, and unapologetically her. I started to seek out her take, not because she was a media figure, but because her perspective had depth and clarity. It's strange, isn't it, that the same person on a different platform can sound entirely different, but that's the power of independence. When women control the mic and the narrative, authenticity rises to the surface. Meghan Kelly became a real voice for many of us only when she left the machinery behind. And in doing so, she proved that what we often call objectivity in mainstream media is sometimes just editorial compromise. Now she's not performing, she's thinking out loud, and we are listening. Let's be honest, many systems weren't built for women in mind. Politics, finance, investigative journalism, these spaces still carry the residue of exclusion, and while progress has been made, many men still see women as less capable, less credible, less deserving of power. So, what do? We harm ourselves, not with aggression, but with tools that protect, empower, and sustain us in spaces that weren't designed for our survival. Finance remains a male dominated field, and studies show women consistently score lower on financial literacy tests than men. But this gap isn't about ability, it's about access, confidence, and representation. Platforms like Female Invest are changing that, offering women tailored education on investing, budgeting, and building wealth. Their mission to make financial literacy the norm for women, not the exemption. Because when women understand money, they understand power. And when they control their finances, they control their futures. Legal literacy is survival. In India, NGOs like Senemi Foundation are training women in domestic violence law, inheritance rights, and workplace protections using street theater, folk songs, and mobile apps to reach even the most remote communities. In the UK, the National Commission for Women runs legal awareness camps that teach women how to navigate police stations, courts and legal aid systems. Because when women know the law, they don't just protect themselves, they change the systems that fail them. Isolation is a tactic of oppression, but solidarity is a strategy of survival. Programs like the Sister to Sister Mentorship by the Noble Women's Initiative connect young feminist leaders across conflict zones, offering training in advocacy, digital security, and movement building. And in tech, collectives like Women in Tech Network are building mentorship platforms to amplify women's voices in digital storytelling and leadership. Because when women stand together, they don't just survive, they multiply. This isn't just about equality, it's about survival. In systems that undervalue women, economic empowerment becomes a shield. It allows women to leave abusive relationships, challenge workplace discrimination, and speak truth to power without fear of financial retaliation. As one activist puts it, economic independence isn't just freedom, it's protection. So, to every woman stepping into male dominated spaces, harm yourself with knowledge, with networks, with courage, because survival isn't passive, it's strategic. And when women are equipped, they don't just enter the room, they reshape the room. Imagine, I recently learned something new, that sports cars were historically designed with male physiology in mind, not just in marketing, but in the very structure of the vehicle, seat positioning, steering resistance, brake pedal height, even crash test dummies. For decades, the industry assumed the average driver was male, and women, we were an afterthought. It's only in recent years that manufacturers have begun to recognize female sports car drivers not just as consumers, but as competitors, engineers, and innovators. But the legacy of exclusion runs deep. Female drivers like Abby Eaton have spoken openly about physical strain of racing vehicles designed for male strength and proportions. In Formula 3, she needed custom footrests just to reach the brake pedals properly. And it's not just motorsport. A 2024 report from Irish EVs found that female occupants are 47% more likely to be seriously injured in a crash because safety testing still prioritizes male body types. The female crash test dummy used in EU tests is just a scaled down male model. No adjustment for muscle mass, bone density, or spinal structure. This isn't just bad design, it's a dangerous design, and it reminds me that systems built without women in mind often put us at risk physically, emotionally, economically, and socially. So, when we talk about harming women for male dominated spaces, we must also talk about redesigning those spaces, not just entering them, but reshaping them. Because survival isn't just about adapting, it's about refusing to be an afterthought. As you go through your day, your commute, your workplace, your social spaces, take a moment to ask, where else has design left women behind? Is it the fit of a uniform, the layout of a medical textbook, the structure of a corporate ladder? So much of what we move through was shaped without us in mind. So, what would it mean to rebuild these systems, not just to fit, but to center women's lived experience? Share your thoughts with us. You can tag me at What About Me Podcast or email me directly, because recognizing the bias is the first step to reimagining the blueprint. Thank you for listening. Bye.